The coverage devoted to scandals and accusers. There wasn't a mad media dash to get the Clinton accusers on air, but they didn't waste a nanosecond talking to those who were charging the same about Donald Trump, including one woman whose allegations go back more than 3 decades. So think about that, and also think about if they're so eager to get these Trump accusers on, which is fine, where was that eagerness to get the accusers of a president of the United States on? Well, what doesn't jive with that? We've got Charlie Gasparino, we've got Democratic strategist Atima, Omara, and we've independent women's forums, Patrice, Onwuka. Patrice, and with you, begin with you. Whatever people's side or biases, and we all have biases, that's fine. This math, this disproportionate attention to some guests over other guests, it's pretty glaring. What do you think? Patrice, what do you think? Okay, I'll just leave you with that pregnant thought. Charlie Gasparino, is there a sense that you're getting that this is going to be the rest of the campaign, that it's going to be this way, and that just get used to it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's two differences. Bill Clinton is not running for president, obviously, so the media has a sort of, I know, as a former reporter for newspapers, I could tell you that they have an excuse not to cover this. But I will say
they didn't back then either.
Well,
truth be told.
Now, this is my point. If you look at the coverage of the Bill Clinton quote-unquote bimbo eruptions, as they were known derisively by James Carville and other political operatives, they were able to sell that theory to the mainstream media in large part. I mean, it's not like the New York Times didn't cover what went on with Clinton and the allegations against him regarding women, but they covered it as, you know, less of a major story because guess what? He was their guy in office, and you got the impression that they were looking to minimize it. They're not doing that here. This is like full on, you know, Donald Trump is way guilty before anything, and I think, you know, that's the legacy of this election. Now, Donald Trump may be guilty. I don't know. I mean, he definitely said something horrible on a tape, which makes you think that he has some sort of these inclinations. But I will tell you this: he's not been given the benefit of the doubt, and Bill Clinton was. I was at the Wall Street Journal at the time, and this is pre Mr. Murdoch buying it. You know, I remember how Bill Clinton was covered, and it was nothing. And I remember how the Times covered it as well. It was nothing compared to the full-on assault on Trump that we're getting right now.
Well, I do remember, Atima, and maybe you can help me with this. I know your views on this subject, and it's fair game, I'm sure, to go after Donald Trump, but I will agree with you. Go ahead.
Right.
But when I don't see, Atima, the same zeal in raising these other issues or chasing down the women who were charging far worse of Bill Clinton when he was president of the United States, I'm just saying what's fair is fair, right? I mean, it's not even close to approximating even. What do you think?
Well, I think, one, Bill Clinton's not running for president, so I think that's, you know, one point is why they're not covering as much. Number two,
but his wife, the charge of, you know, his wife enabled,
I mean, I know
enabled a lot of this. Or worse, when after these women made their charges. Right. Now, she made it discovered later on she was wrong and all that, but I'm just saying, fair game or not? She didn't enable it in any way, shape, or form. She may have certainly been in defense of her husband, which would have been appropriate. But I would say that, you know, you had Kenneth Starr, who was the avenging angel on a lot of this stuff, especially for conservatives back in the 90s. It was all revisited then. I mean, we impeached a president over this whole thing. I was a teenager in high school, and my mom spent half the time trying to make sure I didn't know what that thing was on Monica Lewinsky's blue dress. So I would say you were a teenager? You know what? Now I'm really old, and now I'm really angry at you. No, you know, seriously, you raise it. But Patrice, my biggest thing with this, I hope the microphone's good with you now, is we're not even approximating fairness. I went back to, in the prior guest, showing the time and minutes on broadcasts devoted to the Donald Trump stories, and believe me, I'm not condoning it or saying that it shouldn't be covered. Very little to the WikiLeaks coverage that is sort of like on and on, day by day, more and more stuff that seems to be, let's say, concerning. There's just no approximating fairness here, not even close.
Well, that's absolutely right.
Patrice first.
I mean, let's look at the headlines. Let's look at the amount of time that's spent on this issue. But when you talk to Americans, I was reading in the Miami Herald this morning a woman who said, I don't want to hear about Hillary and Donald. I want to know actually what their policies are to get, people back to work in my neighborhood. What are they going to do about Social Security reform? And so that's what Americans are really listening for. But even more interestingly, I think, Americans are sick and tired of corrupt politicians who are undermining trust in the institutions that we care about. We're not hearing about the IRS targeting conservative donors and organizations. We're not hearing about, the sundry list of institutions that have been twisted in favor of, a lot of progressive policies and, frankly, the Clintons, to support what they've been doing.
Well, that's a great point. But I will say this: part of the reason why that is occurring is because Donald Trump has not really raised those issues enough, I believe. But I think you should go back, and we should do some of this. You really have to go back and think of how the media covered stuff back in the 90s, the Clinton scandals. I was there. I was at the Journal at the time.
Were you in high school at the time?
Definitely not in high school.
Right.
Okay, but I will tell you this: I remember watching the Capitol Hill Gang. That was a popular talk show on CNN when the Monica Lewinsky tape things first came out. They treated it. It looked like Bill Clinton was going to get impeached then because he lied under oath, right? Well, that was the suspicion that they had proof of that, and they treated it like it was like a death of the president, not an impeaching of a corrupt president. And I think that's the difference between what we see now and then. It seemed like the media was. I mean, I had many arguments with colleagues back then who said, "Oh, you can't impeach Clinton over lying under oath."
Wait a minute, Charlie, you were arguing with colleagues?
But what their point was, but these are journalists who said this, Neil. These were journalists who said high crimes and misdemeanors. What Bill Clinton lying under oath is neither. He shouldn't be impeached. They were coming to his defense. It's so much different now. This is pile on with Trump. And by the way, I'm not saying that Trump did his right. I mean, that video, that noxious language gives you some sort of rationale that he might do the other stuff, obviously. But you just
I'm for going after that. Yeah. I don't think ignore it. I want everyone to understand. Right. I do not say ignore it. I do not say ignore it in a debate or don't bring it up in a debate. I am saying try to feign some resemblance here because I'm going to run through this show, this shark thing that escaped from the cage, because I think that shark is the equivalent of the media biting and chasing stories that it wants and not the fairness that will be represented by said diver in cage. So that will be my metaphor for the next couple hours on this show, that's what the American people are being treated to.
By the way.
Really?
Well, I think it's a couple of things here, Neil. Like, you have the fact that, again, this was very much heavily explored in the 90s. All of these women were interviewed under oath by Kenneth Starr. Kenneth Starr didn't even want to use Juanita Broderick because she couldn't.
Think about what you're saying. Now, I want you to think about what you're saying, though. It was heavily explored. There's no need, even then and now. Why go into this? It's ancient history. It's years old. So now you have CNN tripping over themselves to get to these women who are making charges decades old. It's okay now. Okay for them to book these guys now.
They're new charges, Neil. That's
at the end of the day, I mean,
he's going to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. I mean, listen, I hated the Kenneth Starr investigation. I remember standing next to the fax machine when it was coming out, and everybody was going for that stain reference. It was disgusting. But fair is fair. I mean, you got to.
I was in grade school at the time. I don't remember these references. I find a bit insulting.